Good morning, everyone. My speech today is talking about the China's new round of reform, which is launched and initiated by the third plenary of the party of the decision. The reform agenda is quite comprehensive package. I will just go through, give some introductions and comments, and some of my colleagues will go to some details for different industry and the market. Let me give you a general comments. I think the decision is inherited Deng Xiaoping's legacy of reform and open door, responding to the major issues currently facing China economy and society. All this show that China's new leader are making the right choices in the historical moment. Okay. And China has entered into an enhanced version of reform. Some major features of this decision. Firstly, is expand economic reform into political, social, cultural, and ecological reforms, so-called 5-in-1, but still mainly focus on the economic one. Secondly, point out the reform towards a modern market system, which is quite important. I will explain later on. Thirdly, confirm the measures, objectives, and the timetable. And finally, establish a quite authoritative organization led by Xi Jinping himself to control, guide, and implement this reform. The first issue is the relations between the government and the market. The key objectives of the enhanced version of reform is to promote the modernization of state governance. They used to use the words to the working class dictatorship. Then they used the word in the Deng Xiaoping's era shifted their focus on the economic development. Now they use the new express, that's the modernization of state governance. The economic system reform remains the key focus because the number one is related to the direct benefit of the people. Secondly, it has wider social consensus and for the economic issues and the social issues. Thirdly, the economic reform is bound to touch on political, social, and value system issues, and therefore lay the foundation for orderly reform in these areas. Still, we cannot rely purely on economic reform to complete social transformation. The political and social reform should promote in a gradual and a continuous approach. That's the reinforce the market roles in the economy. At the beginning, when China was transformed from a planned economy to a market one, the government plays a quite unique role for transformation and for feeding the growth. As market developed, however, instead of the feeding out of government's role, it was enhanced by interest group. They advocate the government role in the resources allocation and trigger the debate over the so-called China model. The decision provides a clear description of the core of the economic reforms as allowing the market to play a decisive role in allocation of resources. Thus, the decision offers a response to the China model debate and signals the turn from a developmentalism state to a true market economy. Let's talk about what do we mean by market economy in China, the logic and power of the market. The basic logic of the market system is to allow price to be discovered by free market transactions and resources allocation to be determined by price signals. The key components of a market system is free transaction, market price, and protection for property rights. The decision removes government's restriction on the transactions. For instance, the administrative approval, monopolize, etc. Deregulate the price, control, particularly for the factor market, and establish the modern legal system in accordance with the rule of law and protect property rights. Redefine the role of the government. The decision redefine the functions of the government, changing corporate registration, investment, and stock insurance from administrative approval to a registration system. Formulating negative list, allowing state-owned enterprise, private one, and foreign one to enter into in an equal way the unrestricted areas. Change the performance appraisal. Used to be dominated by GDP growth, particularly for the local government. Enhance the role of government in providing public goods and services. In summary, the role of government is to adjust fluctuation of in the macroeconomic cycle, provide the public goods and services, and maintain market order through rule of law. Rebuilding public finance and the fiscal system. So the first big issue is about the role of government and relations between the government and the market. Second one is fiscal reform. Decision laid out comprehensive plan for fiscal reform. The context of fiscal reform includes establish a comprehensive and transparent budget system. Comprehensive should be all-round budget, which means standardize all kinds of revenue, spending, borrowing, currently outside of the budget system. Transparency means the fiscal information is open and accessible. It might be difficult to achieve the transparent at the moment, and we'll move forward step by step. Fiscal reform, there are other specific measures. Increase the proportion of fiscal expenditure of public goods and services related to people's livelihood. China probably is one of the highest fiscal revenue percentage in the world, but compared with other countries, particularly with those same GDP per head, the public expenditure, the expenditure for public goods is much lower. Standardize the government's revenue, spending, borrowing, and investment. Reclarify the fiscal revenue and spending responsibilities between the central and the local one, which is quite a big issue. Adjust the tax income structure, replacing the business tax with value-added tax in the service industry, raising the proportion of direct taxation, and increase the tax categories and tax rates for property, resources, environmental protection. Reduce micro tax burden, reduce and regulate various kinds of administrative fees. The tax is not very high in China, but the fees is very high. And strictly control government's officials' consumption expenditure. The next one is financial industry. are three tasks. One's price reform, which include the deregulation of interest rate and exchange rate, opening up the capital market and the capital account convertibility. The third one is broaden market access. I think compared with other areas, the reform of financial industry has been underway in recent years, and the achieving the target set in the decision over the next 3 to 5 years is prospect. State-owned enterprise. This decision extends the equal treatment to enterprise of both public and non-public ownership in terms of property rights, protection, market access, and policy treatment. Those reforms will help eliminate discrimination against the private enterprise. Nevertheless, the decision still uses the ownership system to divide the two types of enterprise and reinforce the dominant position and the functions of the state-owned enterprise. This conflicts with the goals of equal treatment and fair competition among different ownership. Obviously, there remains much room for further reform. Environmental protection. The decision has recognized the importance of the environmental protection and raised the significance of the established ecological civilization system to the level of parity with other areas. China has paid enormous price in environmental, ecology, and natural resources for its high-speed economic growth. Not only does it endanger the livelihood of the people, it will also have the disastrous effect on their distance. The environment is an area of public interest and create a huge fiscal burden and hidden debt. No further delay would be allowed to solving this problem. The decision announces the new leadership's determination to protect the environment. However, concrete measures and policies are yet to be seen. Other reforms deserve special attention. The anti-corruption, the establishment of a free trade zone, currently in Shanghai, probably there are other areas in China. Reform in the areas such as education, healthcare, easing the one-child policy, reform the current Hukou policy, which divides the citizens in two categories, city and countryside. There will be a more free migration when we solve this issue. Extending the age of retirement, etc. These reforms are bound to have a profound impact on the development of China's society and economy. The tough combats ahead. Decision pledged the enhanced and market roles, not the government's in allocating resources. Nevertheless, history suggests there has been strong resistance from the ministries, the local governments, SOE monopolies, which benefit from the current system and refuse to give way. China needs to shift away from a traditional ideology such as socialism versus capitalism, public versus private ownership, party leadership versus rule of law. The success of new reform must conquer the resistance from those special interest groups and emancipate the band. It would require determination and authority of politicians, social responsibility and rationality of elites, as well as public outcry and social pressure. Only then can the power of reform deliver substantial result in this combat? Probably manage the reform process. Reform need to maintain steady economic growth, say 6 to 7. I mean, in the middle term, not in the recent years. We're talking about 7 years or longer time. And adjust the economic structure, curbing the excess capacity, high energy consumption, and high pollution industry. Reform might increase costs for enterprise and generate certain level of economic and social risks. China's leaders must carefully control their costs and risks, narrow the income gap, and let most people share the benefit of the reform. Political reform. China is at a critical turning point from a transition society to a modern society. The market system is one key component of a modern society. However, we wouldn't see a well-functioned market system, sustainable economic growth, legitimate wealth accumulation, and a fair income distribution, unless democratic political system, the rule of law, a free place in place. In this sense, political reform is a crucial element to achieve the transformation into a modern society. China's economic reform is bound to touch on political, social, and value system issues. Either economic growth lead political reform, or the political reform would impact economic reform. This future of China remains to be seen. Some resources of the reform dividend is transformation of government function and a better legal system which effectively reduce market transaction. People always talking that the production cost in China is very, very low, including labor and some infrastructures, but the transition cost is very high. Promote market transactions and provide incentives for innovation. Price reform, which facilitates effective allocation of resources and encourages growth model to shift from factor input to improving productivity. Fiscal reform, which enhances the government's ability to provide public goods and narrowing income gap. Tax reform, which support the development of service industry and reduces over-reliance on the secondary industries. Rural land reform, which shift more income to rural households, relaxing the rules of selling farmland, diversifying the land supply, and curbs the rising of houses price, and the environmental protection, ecological improvement, which not only benefit the people but also create investment opportunities in environmental protection and new energy industries, etc. All this will be benefit not only China but by balanced, sustainable growth, also the U.S. and the rest of the world by creating more business opportunities and less uncertainties. Reform gives room to the creation of dividend. The extent of the creation of the reform dividend is determined by the effectiveness and the success of the reform. Reform dividend can only be obtained through competition and innovation. Thank you.
Okay, so we still have about 10 minutes, so we can entertain some questions from the floor. Okay.
You spoke a bit about the potential inherent contradiction between reform towards a pure or true market economy and the dominant role of
The transformation I mentioned from the traditional one to a modern one should be consistent between different areas, including economic one, social one, political one. You cannot do it alone to achieve this goal. But the roadmap or the may go economic first, then to achieve more consensus for the rest of the areas to be reformed. But there is another possibility is the economic reform being suspended or being failed because of the political system without any reform. So that's uncertainty. But my observation and my belief is, in general, economic reform will trigger the political one, and hopefully it will be a smooth one, a peaceful one.
Okay.
Thank you, Professor Qin, for your comments. One of the stories that's happening alongside of the reform effort is efforts by the government to start the deleveraging process. So we've had 5 or so years of rapid growth in the credit numbers in China. And if you're trying to maintain fairly rapid growth over the next few years while also deleveraging, there's an inherent conflict there. Would you say that the government is going to if you had to prioritize one, would you prioritize pushing reform and waiting on deleveraging, or pushing the deleveraging process and maybe holding back on some of the more disruptive reforms like financial sector reform?
On the one hand, deleveraging shows the problem of the model, because they rely heavily on the factor input, including capital. When they try to solve this issue, on one hand they have to control the process of deleveraging. Otherwise, there are negative impact on their growth and the enterprise. But they have to do that gradually. They have to do that. Without deleveraging, they cannot change the model. So for the long run, they have to change the model. But for the short run, they have to carefully manage the process of deleveraging.
You talked about some of the political risks. Do you think that China will ever pull back the curtain and eliminate censorship of the internet and censorship of the media?
I don't think China will do it even further. Sometimes they do it, but in general, they understand it's a diversified society. It's an internationalized global society. They will not change one day. They will think about that, and I believe gradually they are more tolerant to accept different voices, but it takes time.
Okay, last one.
In today's Wall Street Journal, there was an article that quoted Yi Gang, who is number 2 at PBOC and the head of SAFE, who said that financial reform would be very difficult because of opposition from the export industry and the large banks. And the article also said that the PBOC, unlike the Fed, is not independent and is only an advisory body. I mean, is the PBOC only an advisory body?
There's a PBOC law in China. which is a little bit different than the position of central bank or federal bank in other countries. The PBOC is, according to the law, is under the State Council leadership. But in recent years, we noticed that the PBOC gradually become more independent in the currency policy, but the law is still there. I don't think I didn't read this newspaper, the Di Gang's speech, but I think compared with other areas, financial industry reform will be more smoothly. I think the commercial banking and the export industry, they have been done for several years, and they already priced in all these changes, reforms.
Okay, because of the time limit, Dr. Qin needs to go down to the floor to run the bill. So let's stop here and join in thanking.